Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video from me, Pickles Parker Reviews. Now, I've just finished watching Revolution of the Daleks, the 2021 New Year's special, and this is going to be my initial reaction, my initial thoughts. There's not going to be much editing in this video, it's not going to be amazingly structured, because I just wanted to get this out as quickly as possible. I just wanted to get my initial thoughts about the episode as quickly as possible to maximise views, essentially. I'm not even gonna lie on that. So, you know, I'll just give you my initial thoughts on Revolution of the Daleks. If you've been watching the channel, you've known that the more that's come out about Revolution of the Daleks, the more I've actually got pretty hyped for it, which is odd considering I didn't like Resolution, Chibnall's first effort for a Dalek story. I really didn't like that at the time, and I haven't really revisited it since. And I really didn't like the Timeless Children, the actual last story we got. So it's odd that I was actually getting really excited for this, I suppose, when you take that into consideration. But I just thought the ideas that were going to be explored in this are really good, something really unique. I love the idea of the Daleks essentially being defense drones launched into the public under the guise of these defense drones marketed by the Prime Minister. I thought that was a really great idea, some great political commentary that could have been done on there, on the government, but also security as well. And I would have loved to see almost these Daleks, a bit like the Power 3, but with Daleks, you know, they kind of go in and become trusted into the populace before then descending into, you know, the evil nature that we know the Daleks for. I was really excited for that. I was really excited to seeing the companions actually, you know, doing something on their own, because it seems, from the framework of the trailer, it seemed as if what was going to happen is the Doctor was going to be in prison for most of the story. The companions were going to be on Earth combating the Dalek threat with Captain Jack helping them for most of the story, and then the Doctor was just going to be in prison for most of it, kind of out of the action. I thought that was what was going to happen, and that's what it seemed like from the trailers. So I was excited to see the companions actually being active and independent for once. I was excited to see what Captain Jack was going to do. I was excited to see a Dalek civil war, because I knew aspects of that were going to be in the story, and I was really excited to see and what was going to be in this story. I think Chibnall had hurt me before, but I thought that, you know, all the stars seemed to be aligning in this story. I thought we were going to get a really good story. I was really excited for it, and I've been speculating a lot. I did multiple pitching Doctor Who Revolution of the Daleks videos, multiple speculation videos. You know, I'd spoken to a lot of people about it. I was really excited for it, and I mean, you guys know how the story goes at this point. It was a disappointment, unfortunately. You know, I can't lie, I was heavily disappointed by Revolution of the Daleks. Why is it called Revolution of the Daleks? I don't really know. A revolution doesn't take place at all, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, it was very disappointing, and I don't hate it before people start saying that I hate it. I don't. The tone of this will probably be quite negative just because I'm so disappointed, but I don't hate it. I think it is better than Resolution and better than the Timeless Children. It's nowhere near in the category of like really bad before anyone gets that impression. But if I sound really negative, that's because I'm just so disappointed, because I was excited for this. I knew there was going to be a lot in this story and that there wasn't going to be much time for stuff to breathe. But I thought it has an extended runtime, so perhaps, you know, everything will be fulfilled, that we'll get a really good companion departure, get really good stuff with the companions, some really good character stuff with the Doctor being in a situation she's never really been in before, some good stuff with Captain Jack, and some great Dalek stuff and some great political commentary on the current world. But this story really wastes all those elements. Like, I don't really know how it managed to waste all those elements. Maybe I was just getting my hopes up. You know, I joked in my podcast with Richard Lloyd and in my pitching Doctor Who videos that I was maybe setting myself up to fail by speculating all this stuff, but maybe I did, because I was just expecting something that wasn't there. And I'm not saying that I was expecting Davros, but I think I really got into my head a story that I thought would be so good, and this really doesn't fulfill it. And yeah, let's just talk about this then. Let's just talk about Revolution of the Daleks. All its best ideas are underserved, I will just say that. The Doctor in prison really doesn't go anywhere. There's some great scenes at the beginning of the Doctor borderline depressed, just walking through the prison the same day over and over and over again, alone essentially, with some really cool stuff. there in the cells. It just looked so empty. You see some nice cameos. We saw the Weeping Angels, I believe, for the first time since 2015. The Silence, so I was very surprised to see the Silence actually for the first time since Time of the Doctor. The first story we've seen them in outside of an 11th Doctor story, so that was reasonably cool. We saw also Ood and Sycorax, and then Pating, but I wasn't really surprised to see the Pating. But yeah, we did see those, some nice cameos, some nice stuff with the Doctor. But, you know, Captain Jack breaks her out. I know a lot of people were speculating this. I didn't think, you know, that it would be impossible for Captain Jack to break her out. I just thought it would be much later on in the story and not, you know, near enough straight away. And yeah, a lot of people thought, you know, wouldn't it be a shame if the Doctor was only in prison for, like, barely anything and then got broken out straight away? That's essentially what happened here. The Doctor being in prison really doesn't really go anywhere. The companions being left on Earth kind of goes places, but it only really goes in places for Ryan, who I will say actually had a really good episode. It's probably the best episode Ryan's ever had. There's a really nice scene between him and the 13th Doctor, and it's weird, I really don't feel like there have been many isolated scenes between the 13th Doctor and Ryan. This feels like it's the first and last one. I mean, I could be wrong, but there doesn't seem to be many, but it was a really nice moment between them, essentially saying, you know, that they're changed people and they need to accept that. It was really nice. I thought Tosin Cole's acting was really good in that scene. I'm usually a critic of Tosin Cole's acting, but I thought he was really good in that scene. And in this episode in general, he's pretty good. But yeah, because the Doctor comes back straight away, essentially, the companions don't have much agency in this story whatsoever. Graham as well, you know, spoilers, but you could probably already guess that this is spoilers, and I already just spoiled that the Doctor's coming back, but, you know, it is spoilers. Sorry if I didn't mention that sooner, but, you know, you probably all have known that. Based on what I imagine the length of this video is going to be, you probably could have already presumed it's going to have spoilers in it. But yeah, Graham doesn't do much at all, and it's his final story, and I really think he should have done more. You know, Ryan doesn't really do much in the story. He has some good character moments, but in terms of actual agency in the story, he doesn't do anything. You know, Yaz has some nice scenes using her police work, and has some nice scenes with Jack. And her stuff will actually probably be followed up on in Series 13. She has a real dependency on the Doctor, and he's scared of being left behind, which I thought was quite nice. But in terms of actual agency, Graham and Ryan, Graham in particular, really don't do anything. So that idea of it being a Doctor Light story is taken away because they don't really do much. And yeah, the Doctor's back. Jodie Whittaker is fine. I thought she had some pretty good moments. She was better in this than she was in Resolution, thankfully, in terms of her moments with the Daleks. Still good. Says mate to the Daleks, which if you watch my Resolution rant way back in 2019, then you would know in that rant I really didn't like that she said mate to the Daleks. And she does it again, but I can let it slide. There are more stressing issues in this story than the fact that the Doctor says mate and fam one too many times for my liking. One too many, you know, I wish he wouldn't say it at all. But anyway, yes, the companions don't really have any agency in this story. Jodie Whittaker's good, but I would have rather she stayed out of it, and that's no disrespect to Jodie, but the framework of the story, it was really interesting seeing her in prison. It was really interesting seeing Jodie perform those scenes, and to have her just back in the Doctor role near enough straight away was disappointing, I can't lie. It just was. You know, I wanted that to be most of... So the problem is with this story is that there's so much potential in so many of these ideas that just go nowhere. The Doctor being in prison, it may be brought up in Series 13, but I really don't know about that. You know, it could be, who knows, but that goes nowhere. And I was saying to Richard Lloyd, and we're talking about how, you know, this is almost like the finale, I guess, you know, so everything should be tied up here. But it isn't tied up here, that's the problem. At least in Resolution, you know, for all its faults, it did tie up stuff in Series 11, but the problem is this story doesn't really tie up stuff, which is one of its problems. It leaves many things open-ended and doesn't really pay off much. But yeah, the prison stuff is really brief. You know, it's good while it's there, but so much untapped potential just wasted. And, you know, that's not the only thing. The Dalek plot, yes, the Dalek plot goes nowhere, really. Well, I say goes nowhere. Obviously, you know, it is the main plot of the... Is it the main plot, though? This is the thing. Obviously, it's essentially the plot. But the story seems far more focused on character drama than the actual Dalek plot until the last 20 minutes. Before that, it's essentially mostly character drama with little bits of Dalek stuff sprinkled throughout, which is fine if it's a two-parter. The problem is this isn't a two-parter, and as I've said many times in the Chibnall era, he has stories that are structured like a two-parter, but they're just a singular episode, and then most of it is set up for a resolution that either doesn't come or is hideously brief. And that was one of his faults when he wrote Doctor Who before showrunner, Para 3. Perfect example, this is very similar to it, but at least Para 3 kind of explored some of its ideas. It doesn't really do much with the cubes in terms of what they actually are. It's very disappointing with the Shakri, but it does do a bit with, you see the cubes established in the homes and all that kind of stuff, so even that was a better execution of payoff and really crap resolution than this story. Because the Dalek plot, about, how long was it? 40 minutes of this story is just, waiting for the Daleks to show up, various characters talking about the Daleks. You see this Leo character being possessed by a Dalek, making these Dalek mutants very quickly. Essentially, obviously, as we already knew, they base these defense drones off of the schematics of the reconnaissance Dalek from Resolution. They make these casings given to the Prime Minister, who's going to release them, but Leo, essentially like the scientist kind of guy, he sees organic matter in that original shell, so he clones a Dalek, and Robertson says, what the hell, get rid of that mutant. But he tries to get rid of the mutant, but, obviously, because seen it coming from a mile away, the mutant grabs hold of Leo and controls him, and then somehow replicates all these mutants really quickly, and gets a whole base in Japan off screen. It's not really explained, but yeah, that all happens, and for about 40 minutes of the story, that's really all that happens with the Dalek plot, and it's mostly just character stuff, because you've got to deal with the Doctor in prison, the Doctor coming back, and then all the stuff with Captain Jack and all that kind of stuff. That takes off most of the story, especially when you're trying to establish new positions for all these characters to be in after the Timeless Children, after these supposed 10 months that have happened. You've got to establish all that, so ultimately there really isn't much time for the Dalek plot. And I think this is one of my criticisms. I was thinking about this, is in Spyfall, the reason that story was such a breath of fresh air is we really hadn't had a global story in Jodie Whittaker's era where, it's a lot of setup, spans multiple positions. The Doctor meets different people, has to go to different positions, the TARDIS team split up, investigate different things, different players, doing different things with, businessmen and all that kind of stuff, dealing with aliens. You've got Infiltrate, the big CEO kind of guy, then you've got different places around the world also housing these things, that very global aspect. The companions go to different parts around the world, investigating that kind of stuff. That was done obviously in Spyfall. It felt like a breath of fresh air. Then it was done in Praxeus, and it was like, we've kind of seen that before in Spyfall, but I can let it slide. It was done not as well, but kind of good in Praxeus. But now you get into Revolution of the Daleks, and that feels a bit tired. It feels a bit samey. It feels like we've seen that before, because we have. And we saw that in Spyfall and Praxeus, so that part of the story wasn't really interesting to me, because I felt like we'd seen it before. And the character stuff was good, the conversations between the Doctor and Ryan, the conversations between Captain Jack and Yaz, the conversation... Oh wait, Graham didn't have anything to do, sorry, yes, Graham had nothing to do. But those conversations were nice. Chibnall, I've spoken about before, is a character writer. He writes characters well, which is odd that his companions are so, non-existent in terms of their personalities, but you can really see his character writing shining through in this. It's clearly what he's more focused upon. But, the problem is he seemed focused on the characters. He really didn't seem focused on the actual Dalek plot. It felt like he had semblances of good ideas here, and nothing went with them. As I said before, all we really get is just, build up for these Daleks, and what happens after that is really brief. Somehow, all the mutants teleport into the shells. Oh yeah, by the way, that press conference-y thing that the Prime Minister does in Downing Street, we saw it in the trailer. The Daleks really don't do much more than that. You thought that was going to be their announcement, and then you'd see more things of that. No, you really don't see any of that. You don't really see the Daleks doing any, defending. They instantly turn bad. They're literally Daleks at Downing Street while she's doing the press conference, and they turn bad. That's how short that plot lasts. That plot thread goes nowhere, essentially. There's literally nowhere where that plot thread goes. She doesn't finish announcing them before they turn bad. That is how wasted an opportunity it is, and I've spoken about it before. It's the same in The Timeless Children. Chris Chibnall comes up with a really good idea just to get to a basic position in that. He just wanted an alternate backstory for the Doctor. He creates this really good idea of the Timeless Child just to get to a very simple position of the Doctor has an alternate backstory. It's the same here. Chris Chibnall just wanted 2 factions of Daleks on Earth. So he came up with this brilliant idea of defense drones and the Prime Minister releasing them. That's brilliant! But he underserves it because he only wanted that there just to get these Daleks on Earth. That was just a means to an end. He didn't really want to explore that idea really any further, and then it's really underserved. And that was the part of the episode I was most looking forward to. Some great political commentary, some great stuff with the Daleks there. You know, intercepting humanity. That's a brilliant idea, and it goes nowhere. That was the most frustrating thing, that it's set up for an idea that really doesn't happen. That really doesn't go anywhere. That idea with those Daleks. And the new Daleks are really a wasted opportunity. They, as I said, they really don't do anything. They get instantly wiped out by the Bronze Daleks, which, you know, is to be expected. They're manufactured by humans, but that feels very... The whole Daleks of War idea just feels very pointless as well. Like, why is it really there? Because it doesn't really do much. Again, it only feels like that's there just to get the Bronze Daleks there, which, you know, the Doctor, rather than try and defeat the Daleks herself, essentially lures another group of Daleks, say the Bronze Daleks. Side note, when you see the Bronze Daleks, it just highlights how, you know, poor the new Dalek design is. You know, I did say I was warming to them, and I was in the trailers, but, you know, you do see them, and they're better in this colour scheme in the black, but they're nothing on, you know, the Bronze Daleks. They look much sturdier, and you can really tell that when they're confronting them. They really do look manufactured. The black defense drone Daleks when compared to, you know, the reliable Bronze boys, but yeah, you see the Bronze Daleks, they destroy those Daleks, so that feels like a really weak plot thread, a plot thread that goes nowhere, as I said, which is really disappointing. That was why I was just feeling, like, for God's sake, you know, that's why I was excited for this story, and it's just gone nowhere. It's just wasted all its opportunities, repeated plot threads from Spyfall, and wasted, you know, the Dalek plot as well. So the Doctor does something really reckless, lures the Daleks there. You know, I can understand that, but ultimately the Doctor doesn't face any repercussions for her actions. It would have been cool if, you know, because the Doctor's been impressioned and she's gone more rash, she's made that decision, and then it backfires and one of the companions die. That doesn't happen. The Doctor, once again, faces no repercussions for her rash actions. And I feel like, you know, the Doctor could have done something else. You know, I'm not saying it's not, you know, a logical step to bring these Daleks in, but it just doesn't feel that that's the first port of call the Doctor would have done. She would try to defeat them herself, and then when all hope's lost, that would have been like Plan Z. But no, that's the first thing she goes to. And these, you know, Death Squad Daleks that are only prioritise killing other Daleks and don't care about humans. What? Yeah, you know, it's great that that they're emphasising Daleks' racial purity, but the Daleks also want to kill humans because they're impure. Why would the Daleks also ignore humans? And also, you could say when remembrance of the Daleks ignore humans. A, they do kill some humans, and B, the Daleks were using some of those humans to help them, so it makes sense why they would instantly exterminate them, and they do get rid of them once they've served their purpose. In this story, there's no reason for the Daleks to not kill the humans, other than the Doctor says, well, they don't care about humans, they're Death Squad Daleks. That's just a very cheap and easy way to get around a plot hole. I'm sorry, Chris, but, you know, that's just not really good enough for me. And yeah, you know, that goes nowhere. That's very rash, and I just don't feel that's very natural for the Doctor to do that, to get these, you know, to lure these Bronze Daleks there. I just don't really know why it was her first port of call. I know it has to happen for the story, but she faces no repercussions, and it feels very unnatural. The best stuff in this episode, other than the character stuff, would be the Daleks destroying the defense drones Daleks. That's quite cool. It's really nice to see the Bronze Daleks back. We haven't seen them since 2015. Well, I say we haven't seen them since 2015. Actually, that's a lie. We haven't seen them since 17, but it feels like a while since we've properly seen a fleet of Daleks, so it was quite nice to see them. That's quite nice. But again, they're kind of defeated quite easily in a weird techno-babble. I would say it's quite clever to use the alternate TARDIS to an advantage, to actually have it as a plot thread in the story. That's quite clever, but the whole idea of, the Doctor will make the TARDIS go fold in on itself and send it into the void, that just comes out of nowhere. That isn't even set up in the story. That just goes off nowhere. But while I'm on the point of this, forced Russell T Davies nostalgia, I've had enough of it. I'm sorry, I have. Captain Jack constantly references Rusty Davies stories. Constantly references it. He literally names Rose by name, references Parting of the Ways multiple times in terms of how he dies, but he doesn't reference Stolen Earth Journey's End, maybe because that would cause this whole story to just fall apart. But he mentions that. He literally mentions Rose by name, which I thought was very odd. You obviously get a mention of the Void as well, and other things as well. I'm trying to remember them all, but certainly there are more callbacks to Rusty Davies stories in there. Yeah, Captain Jack just feels like a walking, talking Rusty Davies nostalgia, essentially, and even multiple plot points just feel like they're ripped from purely the Rusty Davies era. And I've spoken about Rusty Davies nostalgia. It's a thing not just in the current show, but in merchandise and everything. It needs to stop, because it is getting rather irritating at this point. That it feels like the show can't stay on its own 2 feet, and that's probably why the Captain Jack and Doctor scene is part of why it felt so awkward. It's because it's purely there for Rusty Davies nostalgia, but it's very apparent that this isn't the RTD era, guys. You can't try and force something. Just try and write new stories, but it just keeps on going back to Rusty Davies nostalgia, and it doesn't really work. I'm sorry, it doesn't. And speaking about Captain Jack, John Barrowman's great. He has some good scenes, particularly with Yaz, but his interactions with the Doctor, they're fine. Nothing amazing though, and that's because I think that ultimately J.J. Whittaker and John Barrowman don't have a very good chemistry. Maybe there's something that I haven't really, noticed. Obviously I haven't seen them in other stuff, but from what we get in this, they don't seem to have good chemistry. But also I feel like Chris Chibnall has actually misunderstood the Captain Jack Doctor relationship and why it worked so well. Because the thing is that I don't want to bring it back to gender, but when the Doctor was a man, Captain Jack worked primarily because it was like, a macho kind of machismo imbalance there. All of a sudden the Doctor was being challenged by another man, and that was why there was a bit of conflict there. That was where the tension kind of stemmed from, particularly with how the Ninth Doctor and Tennant are writing quite macho doctors, I suppose, quite masculine, confident doctors, I suppose, probably the two most masculine and confident doctors we've ever really gotten, barring maybe John Pertwee. That's why it works, because it almost played on those masculine ideals. The Doctor felt challenged, and that's where the comedy from their relationship stemmed from. Also, you got those innuendos there between the Doctor and Captain Jack, which you can't really do now the Doctor's a woman, because you just can't do that as simple as that. And you can't do those innuendos, and you can't play on those masculine tropes, and you can't create that tension there, because not only is the Doctor a woman, so you just physically can't do that now, but also the Doctor's relationship, it isn't very confident. In fact, the Doctor is very unconfident, as explored in this story, so therefore you've got nothing to bounce off in this story. Their relationship is very paper thin, and they're hugging, and that's just not really the Doctor and Captain Jack. It was that kind of relationship was almost akin to a rivalry. That's why he worked with Ecclestone, and that's why he worked with Tennant as well, despite the fact they're two different Doctors, because they were both very masculine Doctors. That's why it worked. And it's funny that you bring Captain Jack into a different era 10 years later and he doesn't work, because it's not his era. He belonged in the Rusty Davies era. It would have been the same if they brought him back in A Good Man Goes to War, because he wouldn't have worked with Matt Smith's Doctor, because Matt Smith doesn't have that masculine confidence for Captain Jack to play off of, like Tennant or Ecclestone did, so he wouldn't have worked with Matt Smith, and he certainly doesn't work with Jodie, so that relationship felt kind of awkward. And Captain Jack would have worked well in this story if the Doctor was off in prison for most of it, but given that she isn't Captain Jack just feels like a bit of a spare part in this story, like the companions. They blow up the bronze Daleks. It's nice to see the Dalek ship interior. It's nice to see the Daleks in there, but ultimately, you know, the Daleks, killing other Daleks is the best part of this story, but it's few and far between. It feels very rushed, and as I said, the whole idea of the Daleks being marketed as defense drones released into the public, it goes absolutely nowhere. You could have landed the Daleks on the story. You could have landed the Daleks on Earth, sorry. And being from space, literally nothing changes in the story. It's a really good concept, utterly wasted for no reason, and that does kind of anger me, that aspect of it, certainly. And yeah, the other thing I haven't mentioned, I suppose, before I talk about the ending is Jack Robertson. What a waste. I say waste, he's not a good character. This only really proves that he's just a walking joke, and he really has no semblance of a full character. He's a walking punchline, really. But yeah, he really doesn't do much in this story. He isn't, you know, he doesn't have as much agency in this story as I perhaps thought he would, judging by the trailers. He really isn't in it that much at all. He has nothing to do with the Daleks pretty early on. He's taken into the TARDIS, and he doesn't really have anything to do with the Daleks, but then the Doctor doesn't really, because the story isn't really about them. And then he tries to have an alliance with the Daleks, which really, again, goes nowhere. Why is he in the story? I really don't understand why he's in the story. It just feels another chess piece thrown in there, and it doesn't really go anywhere. Then we get to the ending, and Ryan and Graham's inevitable departure comes, and that again doesn't really go anywhere. In terms of goodness, actually, that's a lie. Ryan's departure, I will actually say, surprisingly, works pretty well. That's mainly because of how it's set up in this story. You really get the sense of Ryan, you know, it's been 10 months, he likes living at home. You already had that CD in Can You Hear Me about him wanting to stay with his friends, and that's actually really well portrayed in this story. To give it some credit, that's actually really well portrayed in this story. And you really understood Ryan's reason for leaving. It felt final, it felt... It worked, it just worked. I feel like Tosin Cole gives his best performance in this story. I really actually liked Ryan in the story, which I usually don't. I thought that departure worked really well. Graham's, on the other hand, no, it doesn't work. I can partly understand it. Of course he'd want to see his grandson grow up, but come on, Graham does nothing in this story. It's his final story, and he doesn't do anything. You felt a sense of build-up to Ryan, but you really don't feel anything with Graham's. It's very sudden. Because Graham doesn't do anything in this story, he really doesn't contemplate it at all. It would have made sense for Graham to carry on, but to be, you know, unsure, but carry on through Ryan's wishes. But, you know, Graham leaving, I know Bradley Walsh probably would to step down, but it's a really unnatural ending. That reminds me of classic series departures, actually. Because those all, not all of them, but those also felt pretty quick and rushed. You know, like Romana's departure from Warriors Gate, for example, kind of comes out of the blue. You know, it doesn't really feel satisfying. It's the same with this. Graham's kind of comes out of the blue, doesn't feel satisfying. And for a character I've really enjoyed, Bradley Walsh has been brilliant. To have him really have no agency and do nothing in this story at all is really damaging. I hope, seeing as they lived, they actually come back. I hope that happens, that they come back in Series 13. Not as the main companions, but, you know, come back in the old story, on the old Earth-based story. I hope that happens, you know. I don't know whether it will, or that's just a closed book, but if it is a closed book, that's really disappointing, actually, how Graham goes out. Ryan goes out pretty satisfyingly. Ryan is a good episode, but Graham, ultimately, it's just not satisfying. Bradley Walsh deserved better, in my opinion. Then the Doctor and Yaz go off. It feels like a pretty somber note, ultimately, but not as somber as it could have been. I've been really speaking about in a lot of videos how I really liked where the companions are dying for the guilt to weigh on the Doctor. And I think, seeing as you had two who were leaving, one of them could have died. That would have been quite nice. But, you know, it doesn't happen. Another missed opportunity, I suppose. And yeah, I feel like I've spoken about all I can really speak about. Just this ramble. As I said, it's very rambly, this. It's not structured at all. It's just my initial thoughts, just putting it out there. And Yeah, I really wanted to like this. I really wanted to like this story, but it's an hour and 11 minutes long, and I just can't ignore how disappointing this was. There are so many good ideas in this story that just go nowhere. Like, the biggest offender being the Daleks' defense drones, that goes absolutely nowhere. Like, why is that even in here? Why is that brilliant idea just ultimately wasted? At the end of the day, I was talking in my podcast in Richard Lloyd how this could be the culmination of Series 12, but I feel like this is a culmination of Chris Chibnall's era as a whole, because mostly all his flaws are present in here, and also his strengths are also present in there, but all his flaws, all these good ideas, brilliant ideas just wasted, means to an end essentially, but wasted as concepts in themselves. The departures are unsatisfying. All the plot beats I was excited for, that Dalek one mainly, but also the Doctor in prison, that doesn't really go anywhere. Full of Rusty Davis nostalgia, which I'm just fed up at this point. And also, a lot of plot beats are just repeated from Spyfall / Resolution, but mostly Spyfall. We've kind of seen this before, guys. We saw it exactly a year ago. Yeah, this story had so much potential, but ultimately it's all squandered. Unfortunately, I don't hate it. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, to be quite honest with you, because it had so much potential, but it just doesn't go anywhere. I'm really not. This story really could have been something special, and I'm just not going to remember it. It's just a generic story, and the Dalek stuff really doesn't go anywhere. It has some good scenes. Ryan is really good in this story. Some of the Captain Jack scenes were nice. Some of the Dalek stuff was nice, but ultimately most of it doesn't really go anywhere, and most of it's wasted potential. Good moments, but as a story, it's just nothing. It had so many good ideas that just go nowhere, that are just underutilised, underserved, and that's the most frustrating thing at all, because there could have been a fantastic story in here, but it's just all squandered. And it's the story of the Chris Chibnall era. I feel like I've been saying this multiple times. I feel like I've said this multiple times, and it's because I have. The Chris Chibnall keeps on doing this, and it's very disappointing to keep on getting my hopes up for stories that have potential and that's just go nowhere. I feel like the trailer actually lied about this story. That might feel a bit extreme, but it advertised a story where the Doctor's in prison, the companions have to deal with the threat alone, and the defense drones released to the public is most of the story. That's not this story at all. The story was mismarketed, and I'm not saying that was intentional, because I don't think it is, but we got sold a better story in the trailer, and that's the most frustrating thing. I was worried that was going to happen. I really hoped it didn't happen, but it did happen, unfortunately, and it's just really an unsatisfying story. Most things are unsatisfying in this. Most things are wasted, and yeah, it has good elements, but ultimately I'm just disappointed. Why is it even called Revolution of the Daleks? The revolution doesn't even take place. Yeah, it's a weird one, this, but at the end of the day, it had so much potential, and it just wastes it all. I'm just disappointed. That's as much as I can say. I can go around in circles speaking about this story, but as much as this initial reaction, these rambly thoughts, first thoughts, I haven't gone online on Twitter or saw anybody saying, any of my friends are saying, I haven't saw any of that ultimately. I haven't looked, because I just wanted this to be my initial reaction without seeing anything, and who knows, I don't know what the general consensus of this story. People may dislike it, share similar feelings to me. People may actually really like this. I don't know, to be quite honest with you, but these are just my opinions, my thoughts. I thought it was really disappointing, and yeah, it had so much potential and just wasted it all. It's really unsatisfying and just ultimately a disappointment, which is such a shame, but it's the story of the Chris Chibnall era. Yeah, so yeah, I know. It's such a shame, isn't it, that this was disappointing. But yeah, that's just how I feel. I really wanted to like this story, and I just didn't. This is just rambly thoughts. I will probably put out a more structured review after rewatching the story, probably in about a week's time. I know that won't get the views this hopefully will, because no one really cares about a review that's a week afterwards. But I just wanted to release this as my initial thoughts, and then really collect it in a more structured review with notes after watching it again, maybe in a week's time. So I'll probably do that, so if you want to see that, then stay tuned, and more videos as well. I won't be as frequent because I've got A-level exams coming up, so I kind of need to focus on those. The A-level mock exams coming up, so I'll probably need to focus on those, so there won't be as much content. So Pickles Park reviews in the new year won't truly start straight away. It'll be a few weeks until we really get into full force into the new year and the new era, I suppose, on the channel, but, you know, that's not starting as of yet, you know, a few weeks to just get myself sorted, but, you know, anyway, you know, that's Revolution of the Daleks. Those are my initial thoughts. What did you think? Did you like it? Did you not? Whatever, drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd be interested to hear it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and of course, a goodbye.